We're on. Okay, people.
Well, thanks for coming.
Stand close to the microphone, otherwise.
Congratulations for actually finding this room. I almost failed, and there's at least 3 people that promised to come that are probably still searching. I'm Klaus Kursawe. I'm currently running a small, let's call it consultancy company, helping power companies to get a little bit more secure in digitalizing the smart grid. And you heard Johan today. He's actually one of the guys I'm working with. I used to be a techie, but I'm now a reformed techie. So I started with a very technical guy, but I now learned we have a lot of technical solutions, but we can't put them in because of policies not working. So I talk more about policies, people, and how to organize your company to actually get a halfway secure grid. But first I talk about rocket science. So this is NASA saying how great they are, and rocket science is sort of the example for something that's actually hard. And they claim the most complex thing mankind has ever built is a space shuttle. And obviously it didn't work very well all the time. Now compare this to the smart grid in number of parts, number of participants, number of companies, and well, sorry NASA, you lose. If you want something really complex, ask an electrical engineer. European power grid, all of Europe is one grid. If something happens in Turkey, you can measure it in Norway. 260 million people on one grid, and that thing is running since decades without ever going down. So it's a pretty impressive thing. And if you think it's just cables, ask any electrician on what blind power is and prepare for an hour of math. And what we are now doing to this system, so big system, very complex system, sort of important. And what's now happening is we're digitizing the entire system. And everybody who ever worked on big digitalization projects and saw them fail should get a little bit nervous right now, because we had much, much smaller things like FBI case file that FBI just wanted a database with all the criminals, took them 20 years, and in the end they abandoned it. So biggest software project ever, run by 3,000 organizations in Europe alone. America is equally big, and we're spending about 100 billion euros into this modernization. And that's part of a diagram by NIST that should symbolize the smart grid, and it's lovingly called the spaghetti diagram, and nobody understands anymore what that means. Now I talked about failures, and there's wonderful examples. London twice had an ambulance disaster where the ambulance dispatch system got an overload, completely broke down, and in the end you had 5 ambulances at one patient and none at the others, and sometimes the body was already picked up for the funeral before the ambulance came. All of this was things, we had big software projects, people thought, oh, we do this manually, why don't we automate this? NHS, biggest software project failure ever. They wanted to run hospitals like we run airplanes, that you sort of got on-demand seating and always a little bit overbooking. So if a patient doesn't turn up, you immediately have another one, and everything very nice. After 11 billion pound wasted, they also abandoned this project. So they actually could have afforded to stay in the EU if they hadn't tried that. And this is all small projects compared to what people like Johan are right now doing, which is digitizing a grid with 3,000 organizations and 260 million users. And since this is a privacy conference, I also added some recent privacy disasters. Target lost 40 million customer data. Equifax is pretty famous. Half of Americans' financial data got lost. Yahoo lost 3 billion accounts. I didn't even know they had 3 billion users. It's half of the world that got hacked. So even simple systems without attackers or even just keeping data secure, we are currently very, very bad at managing. And now, again, we go and digitalize our most critical infrastructure. And there are already very nice examples how that goes wrong. And there was a talk in Amsterdam where somebody found out that every smart meter in Spain used the same cryptographic key, and they got that key out of smart meters. So somebody had the key to 40 million meters, and they have a remote disconnect switch, so you can actually turn them off if you have this key and can connect. This is, I use this with my students as a quick exercise, find 2 errors in this protocol. It's the most famous smart metering protocol, 2 errors in the authentication protocol that everybody can authenticate. Usually my class takes about 5 minutes to find at least one of these errors. Amateurs produce amateur cryptography. Somebody's thinking, how hard is it to make my own cryptographic primitives? I found out it is actually pretty hard. And GCHQ, so not dissing the Britons here, but they're very good for a lot of examples. So the British Secret Service at some point decided our smart meters are just not secure enough as they are now, and had the whole thing reworked. So we see a lot of security issues, and a lot of them, like all devices having the same key or somebody making their own cryptography, are also very, very unnecessary. We also see, I mean, the other topic of this conference is organized crime, so we see organized crime already moving in. In Malta, somebody offered a service for $1,600. I manipulate your meter, and from now on you don't pay electricity anymore. In Puerto Rico, the FBI found out that a large part of the meter population was affected, and there's many more incidents that people don't talk about because it's a little bit embarrassing, or criminal investigations. So we already see, at least for smart metering, organized crime has found a business model, and they're immediately moving in. And something that we also see happening, that's like the early set-top box security for pay TV. We have bad devices that can be attacked by bad attackers, and when we get the devices slowly better, we train our own attackers. So by the time we have secure devices, we also have highly qualified attackers. And that a couple of companies didn't survive because they trained their own enemies. And well, GDPR, there's a new business model coming up. So in the old days, if I wanted to blackmail you, I needed to encrypt your hard disk. Now I can take your data and say I can cause a data leak. What was the fine for that again? I cannot publish it for much less. So there is some fear that GDPR is actually now also creating a very fun new business model for organized crime. And normal ransomware, everybody heard about this. A lot of control systems have pretty old computers, so we also may be collateral damage. WannaCry never tried to hit electricity companies, but they did because updating those things is hard. So if you find vulnerable computers, that's probably them. And if the power supply of your entire country depends on it, you don't want to run around and try to find 10 bitcoins. We also had state-level attacks. Your friendly neighbor got attacked twice by now, actually. Somebody hacked through their normal IT infrastructure, started with a phishing mail, went all the way to the control system, shut down 250,000 households, and then essentially wrecked all the devices so they couldn't be remotely turned on anymore. There's a lot of people giving a lot of talks about it. The one thing that I actually find really scary about this is that statement I found somewhere. We could restore power because we had well-trained people. So the whole digitalization project was new. So the old people that still knew where to find the car to drive to the substation and manually pull a switch were still around. In 5 years, those people are gone. So if somebody does such an attack in 5 years, nobody will know how to turn that stuff on again. And, well, it is a nice warning. Security people are now sort of liking this because we have a nice example, but we don't see that much action coming up in a lot of operators to actually really increase the security and get us safe in this 5-year deadline. And to make it more scary, this malware has actually been found in other American and European utilities, so it hadn't been activated, but it had been there already. So talking about cyber war, there are people that are getting ready. If needed, they want to be able to shut you down. So how did we get there? And even more importantly, how do we get out? So the first thing, I was working in a test lab a couple of years ago, and our first experience was if you send a very qualified penetration test, it's actually overkill. They take the device and they come back after 10 minutes. I've broken it in 10 different ways. Can I do something fun now? So what was missing was actually basic hygiene. Normally we talk about risk. I have a risk and I put some controls in there to control this risk. But what's missing was the equivalent of brushing your teeth in the evening. You don't ask what bacteria do I kill by brushing my teeth, you just do it. And things that have been done wrong is like self-made crypto. Nobody should do crypto themselves unless they have a PhD, and even then they shouldn't do it themselves, but in a big group with a lot of reviews. You can argue if you encrypt, but if you do encrypt, then there are good standards and use those standards. Updatability, security ages, new attacks come out, protocols get broken, so we need those devices out in the field for 20 years, we need to be able to update them. I've seen devices that had an update function, but then the memory was full. So yeah, technically we can update, but the update needs to be smaller than the original software. I've never seen that one work. Basic physical security. I heard people that said, but there's a high voltage sign on my substation, so it's secure, right? No criminal would be stupid enough to open a door with a high voltage sign. Well, they do. Robust interfaces. We've seen a lot of devices where if you just ping them, so there's a standard thing to do, are there any vulnerable devices, an Nmap scan, and we had devices that just died if somebody asked, are you there? So they didn't expect to be asked, are you there? So they crashed. And if it's that fragile devices in our infrastructure, then well, obviously the manufacturer did something wrong. And basic manufacturing security, who can actually change your code? Does the cleaning personnel have access to your server room? Basic things that in IT security we actually thought we knew since many, many years, but we found server rooms that were used as storage rooms. So yes, of course, everybody can walk in there because everybody needs paper. None of this is very expensive to implement. It can be a lot. So we made a long list of things you should do for security hygiene, and a lot of vendors, they complained about the length of the list, but they couldn't find a single item that they actually objected to. So it's a little bit like a man first moving in with a girlfriend. There's a lot of demands, like put down the toilet seat, bring out your empty beer bottles, wear fresh socks in the morning. And each of them makes sense, but if they all hit you at the same time, you may be a little bit overwhelmed. And that's pretty much what's happening to our vendors. IT-OT integration, that's a cultural problem. If you talk to OT people, they were disconnected for their entire career. They love their machine. And they're just interested in keeping their machine running. And IT people usually, well, we love data, we love trying things, like the Facebook motto, move fast and break things. This is the opposite of what you want to do in a nuclear power plant. You want to move slow, you don't want to break things, you want to be extremely conservative. You want to have debuggability. If I encrypt my data, I can't debug it anymore, so I don't encrypt. Some security controls are actually safety hazards. If I have a firewall there that can actually literally take fire, so this is now a safety risk. Or if I have an intrusion prevention system that can stop the one command that it never saw that actually just need now to stop my plant from melting down. Patching, I patch my Windows machine about twice a week. But if somebody would ask me the question, can you guarantee me nobody dies if I implement this patch? There's a lot of very old software that probably Microsoft didn't test because they don't even know it exists. Can you guarantee that old software still runs? And if it doesn't run, can you guarantee nothing explodes? And that's why we still find Windows 7 or older machines out there that have never been patched because they just don't dare. Well, and they focus on the process and not the data. So as IT people and privacy people, we are always used to the thing I want to protect is the data. Here, what I want to protect is the running process. If my computer here gets hacked, I shut it down, disconnect it from the internet, put out the hard disk and start the forensics. If my transformer station gets hacked, I can't just shut it down and start the forensics because there's an entire city hanging on this. So what do I do? My goal is not to keep information safe, my goal is to keep the process running. And it's a very fundamentally different way of thinking. Different accessibility, different dependencies. I found one protocol that's actually a real-world authentication protocol on a control station. You send a command, the control station says, well, you need a password to execute this command, and here's your password. So anyone sees why this may be sort of a strange idea. And so the first reaction is, what on earth did those people smoke? How can anyone think this is a good idea? live in Holland, so that's actually a pretty reasonable question. It turned out the guy who did this actually was pretty clever. He got instructions from his boss, we want to be ISO certified. And ISO certification says every device needs a password. And here is a list of password properties, big letters, capital letters, small letters, numbers, special characters, whatever. Make it happen. And then that guy looked at this device. No keyboard. It's somewhere in the middle of a forest. No accessibility, no key management, no capacity to run any real authentication software. So the task was essentially impossible. But instead of telling his boss, forget your ISO certification, it just doesn't apply for us, he found a solution that got his box ticked. He has now password authentication. His boss could check the box, all our devices are password authenticated. They got certified, everybody is happy. His boss is happy because he got certified. He is happy because the system still runs, and the hacker is happy because they still get in. So everybody wins. So the failure here was not the engineer. The failure was we took an IT idea, everything should have passwords, applied it to a system where it absolutely doesn't work. And the workaround is actually the worst because now we have the illusion of security without any security. Organizational issue, that's fun quotes from the field. So somebody bought smart meters. They failed very, very badly, so they tried to fire the guy responsible and found out there was none. So nobody was actually responsible for security. Well, maybe the CEO, but he decided not to be responsible himself. Or they outsourced the whole procurement to the IT department. The IT department didn't know what to do, so they outsourced this to an external company. They bought the stuff and then left. I mean, that's what consultants do. We do stuff and then we run away and leave you to clean up the mess. So again, nobody responsible and a pretty bad system. Very common, we have reorganized so often that nobody actually knows what his job is anymore. So they're all struggling. We have the OT department, we have the IT department, everything is now mixing together. Everybody in the power industry seems to be in a constant reorganization, and sometimes actually things get lost in there. And case study on organizational issues. Anyone heard of the Marucci wastewater treatment? It was actually the oldest attack on a critical infrastructure. Some disgruntled employee who got fired, but he still had all his equipment in his car when he got fired, drove around and inverted the wastewater pumps. So instead of pumping wastewater out into the sea, they pumped in the other direction, which stunk. It took several weeks for people to realize this is not just our pumps being strange, but we may actually be under an active attack. And there are technical measures, but mainly this was actually an organizational failure. Well, first, don't piss off your employees. Be occasionally nice to the people that work for you. That's actually the best protection. But well, most CEOs probably disagree. Training, the engineers saw something was happening, but they never suspected a security issue. Policy, you fire someone and you don't check, does he still have radio equipment that can control my critical system? Well, and they actually had security measures, but they had never turned them on. And most failures we do see are actually not technological failures. Technically, we can solve a lot of things. There are policy failures, or the technology that exists is just not installed or not bought or turned off. And that gets us to the NIST proposal, expanded NIST proposal on how to build a secure system. So first you need to figure out what do you actually want to do with it. And that's actually surprisingly hard. I heard a lot of people that say, I want a smart meter, but I don't really know why. But if I get all the data and I look at it long enough, I will figure out what to do with it. And this whole big data, everybody wants to collect data, and they believe if I meditate enough over this data, then suddenly the use cases will come up. For security, it really helps to know beforehand what your system is actually good for. Risk assessment, what assets do I have, which also seems to be surprisingly hard. What are my vulnerabilities? What are my threats? Am I threatened by government style, by hacktivists, by my 8-year-old nephew? External dependency analysis. Do I use open source software that has been written by one poor guy in his attic overnight and everything depends on it? Do I need external services like GPS? What happens if they fail? Privacy assessment, and from this you get high-level security requirements, and you build an architecture, you make vendor requirements, I'll talk about them a bit more. You look for standards, then you check if you conform, you test, and of course by that time your use case will have changed, so to keep people in business you start right over top. So NIST forgot the big red arrow, that is job security, but usually use cases do change a lot pretty quickly, threats change. And yeah, know thy system, I managed asset management, make an analysis. This is also quotes from DSO. We have no idea how many devices we have in the field. And we don't actually even know where our cables are. We hope with smart grid we can find our cables. It's very hard to secure you if you don't even know what you have. So not talking about what version, but not only what devices. And the last thing that's also a very classical security blunder, you build a system for one purpose, you then find out, oh, I can do so many other things with it, and you never ask the security guys, was this actually secure enough for this? And I have seen streetlight control systems turning up in substations with streetlight level security. Procurement is actually surprisingly hard. This is your first line of defense. If you don't ask vendors that they sell you secure systems, they won't. The cheapest vendor that satisfies your procurement requirement wins. And if you didn't ask for security and the cheapest vendor is not secure, you have to buy them. And people actually have been sued into buying the insecure devices because they didn't put security in. And you need to have a verifiable interpretation. There were really, really amazing interpretations on what secure actually means. And there were probably other talks about compliance. I like certification, it helps a lot, but it can also really, really backfire. In America, everything needs to be certified that goes at least on the higher end parts of the grid. And they decided that critical systems like really big power stations or power stations that can actually start without needing external power, they are more important, so they need more security. So what does an owner of a power plant do with, oh, I have this extra generator to be able to start, do a black start, and now I need to spend $1 million more on security because of it. Go. So America is actually reducing their grid stability by power plant owners removing black start capacity, so they need to fit into lower security levels. Well, and other thing why procurement is hard, if you mess it up, if you make one requirement that nobody can satisfy, you lose, then your entire process is down the drain. This is why a lot of people are very defensive. And you also need to ask about lifecycle management. I have seen vendors saying, if you want me to install the system, I need your full Active Directory. So this is where all your passwords are stored. And then the security guy was a little bit on the wait a second side. And then the vendor said, well, do you want it or not? Do you want me to call your boss and tell him you delay the project? And he got the access. Or if you test our system, if you do a penetration test, it voids the warranty because it's not meant to be tested. Well, it's what the hacker will do. But voiding the warranty is a very, very big stick. So this is also a thing that needs to be in procurement. Think about the life cycle, think about I need to be able to test, it needs to fit in my architecture, and I want to know beforehand all the things you want to do. And Scott Adams made a very nice comic. Once you sign the procurement document, your vendor owns you. So before that, you own the vendor. After that signatures, it completely turns around. And that brings me to priorities. So this is the blockchain. And there's actually another talk about blockchain right now. I've been on the biggest European electricity fair, and every other stall was somebody talking about blockchain. I met DSOs that have 2 security people, and one of them is full-time busy seeing how they can use the blockchain. And I mean, I love this thing. I did my PhD about this. I spent 5 years on blockchain, so it's my moral duty to love it. But it doesn't solve all these problems. We all want to be sexy, I understand this. We don't want to miss the next big thing. We all want to be rock stars and not plumbers, but what we need here is actually plumbing. And writing good requirements, it isn't sexy, it is boring, but that will actually solve your problems. And it's fine to invest in the blockchain, but it doesn't mean you don't have to do your homework anymore. And the claims I saw, it was actually really hilarious. You don't need secure meters anymore because blockchain. Okay, so no more secure end devices because the blockchain knows. Or privacy is solved by the blockchain. Well, it's dying the opposite, it's publishing things. So priorities for C-level people, yes, you can do your sexy toy project, but don't let that distract you from getting your homework and doing the stuff that actually really helps. On humans, I think there's also an entire talk on awareness in humans. So we try to make people aware that all these things are actually you're not allowed to do. If you plug in a USB stick, of course you can't plug in a USB stick, could be infected, and PDF files can be infected, and visiting websites, all these website attacks, reading your mail. Well, this is what these things are good for. So we keep telling people they're not aware or they're idiots, and we don't give them the tools to actually do their job without violating our policy. Like, they reuse their passwords. I'm reusing my passwords. I have 50 different passwords. I can't remember them all. And okay, you can have a password manager. That would then be good company policy to give that to people. Or you can use hardware tokens. But just saying, here's our password policy, so think of a new good password every week. Good luck. That doesn't work. So we need to think much harder on how do things actually fit in the workflow. If I don't allow you to use USB sticks, maybe I should then provide you with USB chargers so you can charge your phone at work without violating company policy. Give you a secure PC to read PDF files, because you will have to do this occasionally. On control systems, it is probably a good idea to have a second PC for normal work anyhow. So think about the people, don't just blame them for being idiots. Think about how does your policy actually work in the workflow. And I'll finish off, since we talk about privacy, with hopefully a little more optimistic thing. This is a classical smart meter reading, and they could actually identify what's happening there. That's the refrigerator, the tea kettle, the toaster. So on a 15-minute reading, you can figure out a little bit. Not everybody has 15-minute reading. Johan is looking a bit skeptical now. You can figure out a couple of things. Now, this looks uncritical, but it gets a bit more critical. So he got up at 5 in the morning. So bad prostate, or is he a Muslim? That's sort of Muslim praying time, so maybe we should observe how that develops over a couple of weeks. 1 hour between waking up and breakfast, so pretty slow. Well, if it's a man, it was slow, probably women more realistic. And tea, coffee, tea kettle at almost midnight. That's not healthy. We should tell you health insurance. So also from this little data, and I'm not sure we infer everything right, but this is not what big data does. It's not about being right. It's about inferring something. So you actually can get some quite valuable data out of it. And the normal approach that people take is we anonymize things. So I have all my data, but I don't know to whom it belongs. Well, sadly, that doesn't work anymore. And I'll show you how to de-anonymize me, so Johan, don't do that. You Google my name and conference, then you see when I haven't been home. Then you take your big data set and you see on which days, or in which data set has nobody been home on these 10 dates. You probably get me that way already. If not, you get it down to some 10 households, and then other information, or when did I actually move to town. You see on LinkedIn when I changed last jobs, so you can probably infer when I moved, and you immediately identified me. And the richer the data is, the more information I can draw out of the data I'm trying to protect, the more easier it is to link it with external information and de-anonymize it. So it's an approach that gets us in an actually interesting legal area. Data has to be anonymous. What does it actually mean if people can de-anonymize? At what point is it now illegal and a violation? And at what point is data really anonymous? So the preferred model is actually, rather than anonymizing data or protecting data, don't collect the data in the first place. And luckily there, cryptography is there to help. So we can actually do cryptographic magic. We can compute stuff on data without ever seeing the data. This is a one-way function. I have a Lego car, I have a hammer, I turn it into Lego blocks. It's very easy to do in this direction. It's very easy to take the car apart. It's very hard to take these blocks and return it to a car if I don't have the manual. So the function that is easy in one way and difficult in the other way. This is a homomorphic one-way function. This car plus this car is this transformer. This corresponding heap of Lego blocks plus this corresponding heap of Lego blocks is the heap of Lego blocks I get from the transformer. So the addition on the cars is actually equivalent to the addition on the Lego blocks. And if I turn this into measuring aggregated metering data, so every meter gets a little car, that's its value. It turns it into blocks, sends all the blocks to the substation. The substation measures how big is my block and then compares the sum of the blocks it got with the block, its own size. So it can now see, did somebody report wrong data or did somebody not report data, did somebody steal energy, but it never needs to see the values in the clear. It only gets encrypted data, it can compare unencrypted data, and you get what you wanted to. You know if you lost energy, but you never get the privacy-sensitive data. And if you know the use case, if you know things like I only need aggregated data or I only need to know if that guy used more energy than this guy, there is actually a lot of magic that cryptographers can do. Reality looks a little bit different, but it actually works. Okay, and that gets me to my two final slides. So again, a slide that Johan probably objects to. I want people to think of security professionals like lawyers, with my hidden goal that at some point I can charge the same fees as my lawyer. So we all would wish to live in a world where lawyers aren't necessary, and security people. Sadly, we don't. Now, if you ignore your lawyer, you're in really big trouble. If you hire a normal lawyer, they will probably say, oh no, you can't do that. If you hire a good lawyer, he tells you, well, you can't do it that way, but maybe this way you can. And if you hire a really fantastic lawyer, he will have a long talk with you to figure out what you actually want, and he will enable things you didn't even dare thinking about. So replace this with security people, actually same setting. And well, Johan already commented.
Klaus, you've had your time, mate.
Oh.
That was brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Questions, people? Oh, yeah. I've got sort of just a thought. I mean, you're hinting about the Internet of Things in there and the vulnerability of the Internet of Things. Mm-hmm. You're hinting about, not hinting, you're saying straightforward that, you know, the ability now of people to actually to find out things and to do things. You're also talking about these vulnerabilities and responsibilities. Let's just take a look at Riga. I mean, Riga is full of Internet of Things. Riga is, and it's got trams, railway, power. How long is it going to be before someone can hold Riga to ransom? In years?
Well, that depends on how much money Riga has. So the whole point on breaking a system and holding you ransom is not how long does it take me to do this, it is how much money do I need to, or how much resources do I need to do the attack. So if Riga is a poor city and I need to do an NSA-style attack to hold the city ransom, then it probably doesn't pay off unless...
But Abu Dhabi, I mean, there's so much money there. I mean, how much could you hold Abu Dhabi to ransom for if you knew what you were doing? And you had 10 million, 20 million.
And I would wait another 5-10 years until the stuff is really pervasive. So right now, a lot of the Internet of Things are being introduced now, so we still have people like in the Ukraine that know how to do things manually. And we already had examples that people broke tram systems almost accidentally, so this has already happened. I haven't seen this as ransomware yet. The problem is you probably also will never hear about it. There was one attack on Gazprom where somebody already blackmailed Gazprom. So they hacked their pipelines, blocked some vents and said, well, either it explodes or we get a small heap of money. So this is already happening. We see already the first ransomware targeting critical infrastructures. I think the transport system in California was targeted. So it is happening. The question is, when does it get so big that we really say, oh my God, we now need to pay? The good thing is, I think the criminals are also not stupid. So if I hold an entire city, if say I hold New York ransom, yes, I will get a lot of money, and then I will get on very interesting lists from the NSA, and there's no way I could escape. So I think criminals are actually better off for now stealing the small stuff and not holding entire cities ransom.
Okay, one last question. Oh, no, two. Oh, you want to respond?
Yeah, because...
Sorry. Wait.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Johan Ramby, Alliander, utility. I think it's a development that is already going on, and we can never keep on track with security, because cities are now getting all those critical infrastructures connected, like waste, transport, electricity, etc., communication, and it goes on and on in a high-speed tempo. You see all kinds of cities like Melbourne, Austin, Dubai, Tokyo. They have a big billion-euro plan to get a smart society, where security is not part of the plan. It's a fight that you cannot win.
On that note, we'll end that point. Security is not part of the plan. So I'm going to quote you on that. I have to give you your certificate and present, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much.